Your business was supposed to give you freedom, but it feels like it's running you, right? In this episode, Matt and I are going to dive into how small business owners get stuck in the day-to-day grind, how to flip the script from operator mindset to business owner mindset. And we're going to share practical steps on how to delegate your time, automate effectively, and build processes so that your business can run itself.
Welcome to the Shift Podcast. I'm Matt Ware with my co-host Evan Weiland. We are in the amazing Renaissance Hotel in downtown Denver. Big shout out to these guys for hosting us here today. And you know, it's interesting, Evan, because so many business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, they start with a dream, right? That's really what it is. It starts with a dream. I have this dream of building this thing and owning and running my own business. And what happens for so many is that a year or a few years down the road, they look up and they realize the dream has become a nightmare. And now all of a sudden, I'm not running a business is running me. And if that's you, you're watching or listening and you can identify with that, this is going to be a great episode for you. Tell us what some of the indicators are that might be the case where you're not running your business anymore, your business is actually running you.
All right, Matt. So yes, I've got 4 red flags that your business is running you. We'll start right from the top. Number 1, you're working longer hours than your employees.
That describes a lot of small business owners.
Most of us, right? Vacation feels impossible, or you just work right through it. So, vacation on the phone, walking through Disney World, right?
Yeah. Families love that.
They love that. Yeah, from experience. Every decision requires your input.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the fourth one is what I call the monkey on the back analogy. And it's sort of a nuance of every decision requires your input, but bear with me. Let's say that you are working on site and you've got an office and your staff members come into your office and they knock on the door.
Yeah.
And every time they come to the door, they have a problem they need solved. And let's say they have a monkey on their back that represents this problem. And you've got a choice as an owner. Are you going to take that monkey off of their back and put it onto your back? This looks like, let me make that phone call for you. Or let me send that email. You know what? Let me figure that out and I'll get back to you by the end of the day. If this is the situation, right, then by the end of the day or by the end of the week, you're not going to be running a business. You're going to be running a zoo. Okay. And so if that describes you, this episode is going to be really good.
So I think as we're starting this discussion, what's important is for you, if you're watching or listening, this is kind of like gut check time. And you've got to answer the question, what do you want? Like really, what do you really want? Do you want to have a job or do you want to have a business?
Right.
Do you want to own a job or do you want to own a business? In my experience, and I talk to a lot of business owners, you know, as a coach and consultant, they will complain about these kinds of things that you're describing, all the red flags you just talked about. I can't go on vacation, every decision, I have to make it, all these things. They'll complain about it, but they don't actually do anything to change it. And a lot of leaders will say they want things to be different. They just don't want to do anything different. And we all know that doesn't work.
Right.
This is an example of like weight loss, right? I mean, we're toward the beginning of the year. People are making New Year's resolutions. A lot of people complain about being overweight. They complain that they're fat, they don't look good, whatever. But not a lot of people actually change their diet and exercise to do something about it. So again, gut check time. What do you really want? And are you willing to change something to get it?
I think there needs to be a mind shift. What worked to get your business started doesn't work to keep it running.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you were indispensable. You made all the decisions.
Sure.
And you had to have your finger on the pulse of everything. But now you've got a team. You've got a team that you can delegate things to. And we're going to get into that.
Yeah. Well, and really what we're talking about is making a shift, right? That's what the podcast is called, and it's called that for a reason. We're talking about making a shift from owning a job to owning a business. We're talking about the shift from being an operator to truly being an owner.
Right.
And you know, the phrase owner-operator gets thrown around a lot in the small business world, especially at the solopreneur level and all of that. And I would actually argue that term, owner-operator, is one of the worst ways you can frame your role in the business. It's one of the worst ways that you could describe, your job, your position, because it makes us think that owner and operator are one and the same. And in reality, these are entirely different mindsets and tool sets and skill sets, because owner and operator are not at all the same thing. So unless you are a one-man shop and you want to stay that way forever, I would challenge you to break out of that idea, to lose that concept, to not even use that term. Don't let those words come out of your mouth, because being an owner and being an operator are entirely different things.
Yeah, very different. I was reflecting back on my experience as an entrepreneur, and I wrote down two things that I think really defined these two very different milestones in my entrepreneurial journey, right? Yeah. And number one was the operator mindset, and that's where I would solve every problem, right? I would live in the moment, and I would focus on survival.
Right.
Okay. But then as I got a little bit better at being an owner, or having an owner mindset, I start to build systems, I think long-term, and I focus on growth and scalability.
Yeah. Well, and I think, what we're saying in maybe slightly different words is, can kind of be traced back to the business classic, the E-Myth, right? Michael Gerber, because that's really what the whole book is about. And, of course, that book's 30, 35 years old now. If you haven't read it, by the way, that's an absolute must read if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur. But that's what he talks about, this idea of the difference between the owner and the operator. The operator is running the business on a day-to-day basis, and the owner is owning the business. They live at a higher altitude. One of the descriptors, that he uses that gets thrown around a lot, it comes from this idea, is the difference between working in your business and working on your business. If you're working in it, you're in the day-to-day, you're in the grind, you're doing all the things. If you're working on it, you live at a higher level, in the level of vision and strategy and all of that. Working in it versus working on it, the owner versus the operator.
Yeah. So as a business owner, you're no longer the hardest working employee. You're now the architect of the business. Let me unpack that. Again, when you started your business, of course, you should have been the hardest working employee, right? You have a team of one, you should be working really hard. You've got a team of two. Of course, it makes sense that you would outpace or outwork that other person, right? Of course, you're burning the midnight oil. It makes complete sense. But now that you're thinking long-term, right? And you're thinking strategically, you can no longer be the person who works the most amount of hours. You've got to think high level. Because your job now is to create a machine that can run without you.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the most common things that I encounter, the mindsets of the business owners that I work with, is some version of the statement, I have to do everything around here.
Sure.
Right? I have to do all the work. And they don't necessarily mean it literally, because they do have a team of people doing work. But in terms of, from their perspective, the work that matters, the work that moves things forward, if I want something done right, I've got to do it myself. I have to do this all myself. And I'm always pushing back against those statements or that mindset and that mentality, because I think it's so easy for owners and entrepreneurs to fall into it sort of unwittingly when they don't really need to. And they've kind of trapped themselves. I always push back and just ask the question, why? Why do you think you need to do it all yourself? Why do you think you're the best person to do it? Why do you think that if it has to get done, if it's going to get done right, it has to be you that does it? What is driving that, right? I think a lot of times there's internal drivers for entrepreneurs. Maybe that's their identity is a little bit too wrapped up in the business. Maybe there's some insecurities, and let's be honest, we all have insecurities. It's okay to admit that, but you've got to know how it's driving you and how it's affecting you. Man, a lot of entrepreneurs, they're just really controlling, right? Yes, control freaks. Sure. And like you said, in the early stages, you have to be, because it all revolves around you. But as the business grows, you can't be if you want growth, right? Control and growth are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Maybe there's a scarcity mindset, right? There's a little bit of a fear that if I'm not burning the midnight oil, this thing's going to evaporate. Maybe there's some arrogance. Maybe you really do think you're the best person on the planet for every job in your business, which I would tell you you're not, and you're crazy if you think that. Yeah. But these are a lot of internal drivers that maybe we're not even fully aware of. I think there's also external drivers. There's things on the outside that are pushing us to think, I have to be the one that works the hardest. I think we've bought into well, that's just what it takes. That's just what's required kind of mindset sometimes. And don't get me wrong, it does take hustle. It does take a grind. It does take work to move a business forward. But again, just pushing back on like, says who?
Yep.
Like what says who that you have to do it this way, or that it has to look this particular way? Is that an expectation you've put on yourself? Is that an expectation your team has put on you? Do you need to go to therapy for what mom and dad said to you when you were 5? I don't know. There's a lot going on there. But I say all of that to say, this is a very common fallacy, and it's a very flawed mentality.
Yeah. You mentioned personality. I just had a total side thought here, but doesn't it make sense that entrepreneurs are type A personalities? It's like, if I'm gonna get something, if something needs done, I'm gonna get it done. Or, you know, like it's like if you want it done right, do it yourself. Of course, it makes sense that the majority of entrepreneurs are that type of personality, and it would make sense that they have a really hard time relinquishing responsibilities to other people.
Sure,
it just completely makes sense.
Well, and once they've gotten something off the ground, they like, this is my baby. Of
course,
right? Yeah. So it's really hard to trust somebody else with this thing that you poured your heart and soul into.
Yeah, and that's why we're talking about it, because this is such a blind spot.
Yep.
But I think it's a journey. I think it's a journey to go from operator mindset to owner mindset.
It is.
And
and journey is a good way to describe it. It's not, you don't flip a switch, right? You're not going to listen to this 20-minute episode and your life's going to be totally different. Right. But we want to bring awareness to it to say, if you're not on the journey, you need to get on it.
Yeah. And let me drive the point home with, since you mentioned awareness. Let's do a stress test. The question is, if you went on vacation for 3 months, could your business run without you?
And we're laughing about this because we're not in a place where our businesses could do that.
Yep.
And so we're not at all like putting something on you, you know, you're watching or listening. We're not saying like, hey, aspire to be where we're at, because we're not there either. Yeah. But I think it's this stretching of our mindset, right? Because there absolutely are business owners, small business owners that can do that. They go on sabbatical for the whole summer, or they do these things that a lot of people would say is crazy. You know, for a lot of small business owners, they'd say, you know, 3 months, like I'd be lucky if I got 3 days where I wasn't interrupted with phone calls or texts or emails or whatever. Yeah.
And I said 3 months intentionally, right?
Right. To stretch us,
right? To stretch us, but to set the bar, because again, yes, like you just said, there are business owners that can go on sabbatical and 3-month vacations, or maybe it's not 3 months, maybe it's 2, like whatever, right? But and if you hear that and you completely turn me off, like try to have some vision. I would encourage you that if you really struggle with that, dream a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Expand your vision for what could be possible in your business.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're talking about is that when you have an owner mindset, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to build the business around my life, as opposed to building my life around the business. And those are two entirely different perspectives and mindsets. You know, I think everybody starts business with that dream, right? Like, I'm going to build this thing and then I can just, you know, like whatever, travel the world, lay on the beach or whatever it might be. Very few people realize the dream. Even if financially it's viable, they don't realize the lifestyle in that because they don't think big even when they're small. And I think this is a trap that we can fall into, where we're so enmeshed in the day-to-day, in the grind, into just making things happen, that we're not thinking beyond that. We're not thinking, you know, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road to what our businesses can be. Jeff Bezos, you know, Amazon founder, he says this. No. Yeah, right. Jeff Bezos says small thinking is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Nice.
And I love that idea, right? That if we think small, we're going to live small. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And most business owners, I think they're thinking about surviving today instead of being like really successful and thriving tomorrow. And the key is you've got to think big while you're still small. And it's not easy to do. It takes discipline. It's something that I went through a few years ago when I started a marketing agency. I was very intentional because I knew that I didn't want to spend every waking hour of the day doing marketing, which is what an agency owner can sometimes feel like they're doing. And so from the very beginning, I laid out a plan that would allow me to build a team to handle all of the ad accounts and the assets and the deliverables. And I had the plan for that team before I ever even had my first client. And some people would say, like, well, you're getting too far ahead of yourself. You got to focus on the here and now and all of that. And that's true. Like, there's a reality check in it. But the point is, I was thinking big while it was still small.
Yep.
Like, I actually had a plan to hire a team when I was in the pre-revenue stage.
Interesting.
And so I think it's just a mindset difference.
Yeah. Man, I really like what you said about pre-revenue. It makes me think of like early days of a new business, like first couple months, and getting really tactical about how you're going to run it before you even get started. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. All right, so speaking of tactical, where do we begin, right? So we're gonna talk 2 practical or tactical steps that you can use this week in your business. Number 1 is the time audit. The time audit consists of tracking your time and being kind of ruthless about it. Like on a daily basis, track your time. What tasks are you doing in an 8-hour workday, for example? And then, of course, identify out of those tasks, which ones are high impact and low impact. What makes a big difference in your business and what is just like, busy work. Matt, everybody talks about time management.
Yeah.
But you can't manage what you don't measure.
Right.
So that's why we're asking everybody to do this time audit. I'll give you an example. So when I was like 21, 22, I was working maintenance at a hotel.
So just a couple of years ago.
Like last year.
Right.
Like 6 months ago. Right, of course. So my job was to, maintain the entire hotel, whether that's fixing a toilet or a light switch, right? And my boss, I'll never forget this. The owner of the hotel asked me to do a time audit. And at first, I kind of pushed back, I was like, man, I'm working, right? I'm getting my stuff done.
Sure.
But he said, no, I want you to like clock in and clock out for every ticket that you receive from a hotel guest. And so I did. And again, I'll never forget this. At the end of the week, I brought him this, and I already found the holes in the bucket before I gave it to him.
Sure.
So I'm like giving him this result with like humility, right? And what we found is that I was spending anywhere between 1 to 2 hours a day on tasks that weren't directly related to my job description.
Yeah.
And that's just the power of doing a time audit.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I'm sure, if you're watching or listening and you're a busy business owner, you're like, man, the last thing that I have time to do is add this sort of tracking audit thing to my schedule. Like I'm busy enough. I don't have time to write down what I'm doing every day, but I can't tell you how powerful this exercise is. For several years in an organization that I led, I had my entire team do it every year.
Wow.
And we tracked it down. We did it, I think, in 30-minute increments, which, for some people, they could do it even more, granular than that, but 30-minute increments. And, same thing, right? Like when I initially asked them to do it, there was this like, what, you don't think I'm working? You don't think I have enough to do or whatever? It's like, it has nothing to do with that. It's that I want to see as the leader, but I mostly want you to see where you're spending your time and energy. And if it's getting you the return that you want in moving, your business, your department, your team, your project forward. And so I haven't done this in a little while, but I've done it multiple times throughout my, my career. And it's always been very eye-opening because I promise you there is more time. I hate to use the word wasted, but I think it is the right word. Here's a better word, misallocated.
Yes.
Right? Misallocated time that if you really looked at it, you're like, well, it felt important in the moment, but this didn't really help. This didn't really move anything forward. And little things, whether it's checking social media or filing through your emails or whatever, that could even be related to the business in some way, but it just doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
And you can find yourself like, yes, I am working more hours than all of my employees. Yes, I've got to take care of every little thing, but that's because of the way that you're spending your time.
Yeah.
And so Will it feel like a little bit of a chore to do this for a week? Absolutely. Is it a chore with big payoff? 100%.
Yeah. And I would say as the business owner, start with yourself, like Matt just said.
Yep.
And then when you do end up handing this to your employees, it's no longer you being a taskmaster,
right?
And cracking the whip. It's not about that at all. You're actually helping them be more efficient and, again, focus on things that are actually in their job description.
Well, and if I can just tack on one more thing to this, when we're talking about the overall business moving forward, which is what you have to have if you're going to have an owner mindset, is you could find that you have team members who are spending a significant amount of time on things that is not bad or wrong. It's even in their job description. But you as the owner at a 30,000 foot view can say, actually, that's not where I want you spending your time and energy. If you would shift it over here, you would be more productive, the business would move forward. And so it's just a tool that it gives you as the owner, and it gives your team to be able to make the most use of the time.
Yeah. So that brings us to the second tactic or thing that you can do this week, right? So, and that is building systems and processes. Now that we've done a time audit, we know what's effective, what's not effective.
Right.
We can begin to build processes around that. If you did give an employee this time audit, and like Matt just said, you've found that there could be some efficiency, or maybe this task needs to be completely eliminated. Now you can build systems and processes around that person or around that department. And you need to start documenting this. One way that I know of is an SOP, or a standard operating procedure. So why is an SOP important to your business? Why should you use it? So I wrote down a few notes here for you. Think of an SOP as a detailed how-to guide, okay, for the tasks in your business. It's like a recipe, okay? Step-by-step instructions that anyone on your team, keyword, anyone on your team can follow to get the job done the same way every single time.
Yep.
So this could be used in any department in your business.
Yeah, any process.
Yeah, hiring and onboarding, for example. Okay, so you could write a how-to description. You could write how to write a job description. Yep. You could write down and document your interview process and the questions that you should be asking. Another one would be customer service. This is a really good one here. You want to have your customer service doing the same thing, saying the same thing, performing the same tasks, dealing with tickets the exact same way. So this could be how to handle customer inquiries, or maybe even steps to resolving complaints.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you can get to some of the other stuff, sales and marketing, right? I mean, how do we generate leads here? How do we send email campaigns? How do we close a sale? What's our sales script? These are all examples of SOPs, right? Shorthand for standard operating procedure. And these aren't things that we're just, saying you should do. We're doing this too, even in this podcast, right? Like we have an SOP for how these episodes are edited, right? And so our editor follows a step-by-step process that we laid out with a little bit of trial and error, and we've tweaked it as we go. But now we know when we hire an editor, and we've hired several, that they can do it the same way every time so that they can meet expectations. And it's not just for other people. We created an SOP for ourselves.
That's right.
The way that we create content for this podcast follows about a 10-step process, from the brainstorming to the content creation to how it's written to how it's said. Like all of that, we followed the same process every time. Not so much that somebody could come in and take our job. Don't get any ideas out there. But it's just the idea, like we know what is effective and efficient to make things run and move forward.
Yeah, and it's really helped us in our process, right?
Yeah.
Like before we had an SOP, it was like, oh, let's just be creative and create content.
Right. We'll just talk and it'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll just talk and it'll be fine. And no, it wasn't fine. So, but after we created an SOP, it really allowed us to be efficient, but be better.
Right.
To be better.
Well, and I think, going back to the big topic of this episode, which is, am I an owner or an operator, right? Is the business running me or am I running the business, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yep.
I think that early on, and we're just using this, as the example, early on in this process, while we were excited, we also felt overwhelmed.
Right.
And it was very daunting to figure out how we work through all of these things. Once we developed a process, now, honestly, even though we're the people that are on camera, on mic or whatever, we've from a mindset perspective, we've elevated to an ownership. Like we own a podcast more than we just operate it.
Exactly.
Because we have processes, we have team members, we've built a machine now. Now, granted, we are integral parts of the machine. We can't be fully replaced in our roles, but the idea is we've built a machine by using these techniques.
That's right. Yeah, and by the way, we would love to hear about you guys implementing these processes in your business so that you can take just that step toward being the owner, stepping out of operator, stepping toward owner. So if you guys find this to be helpful, leave a comment, right? Let us know that you found it helpful or that you had a win, and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, I think these are some really just practical, like easily implemented tools and tactics that can sort of move people, like you said, on the journey, right? Because it is a journey from being an operator to being an owner. And I would just challenge you, if you're watching or listening today, that the first step, quite honestly, is admitting it, right? I mean, just like in the recovery programs, right? Like admitting it is the first step to recovery. Yeah. The truth is that nobody lies like leaders, right? Like we're really good at lying to ourselves about the state of our business and our organizations. Nobody lies like leaders. So you've got to be honest. You've got to admit if there's a problem, if at the end of the day, your business is running you rather than you are running your business. The bad news is that if you're the leader, you are the problem. The good news is that if you're the leader, you are also the solution, right? And so maybe you have dug yourself into a hole. Maybe you've backed yourself into a corner. Maybe you've created the problem in your mindset because you're thinking as an operator. But the good news is you have the power to change it. You can dig yourself back out of the hole. You can come out of the corner. You can begin to operate with an owner mindset. Now's the time to shift your perspective, shift your mindset and say, I am not an operator. I am an owner. I do not own a job, I own a business.
Hey, if you're listening, watching, and you know that this is your next step, like that this is something that you need to be doing, is from moving from operator to owner, and you need help, feel free to reach out. I invite you to reach out to Matt or myself. This is something that we're good at. We do all the time. We really, really enjoy helping business owners move through that journey. We just want to say thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Shift Podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe as usual, and we'll see you guys on the next one.